Good evening, everyone. Next time you're given a job offer, don't forget that there is a real dollar number that's attached to staying quiet. And researchers actually measured what that number is. Could be as high as $27,000 lost. So, economists ran a real experiment on nearly 4,000 tech job seekers, and half of the group was told most people counteroffer, and most people who counteroffer at least get some of what they ask for. So that one nudge alone encouraged people to actually ask for more. So it went from 54% of people asking up to 61% of people asking. And the people who did have a counteroffer, a counter ask, walked away with about 12.5% more compensation than the other group. So for this group, this job role specifically, that averaged out to about $27,000 a year that was left on the table by the people who simply said nothing and didn't even ask. So ask ourselves, why did that other half stay quiet? Almost always the answer is the same. It's fear. It's, what if they pull the offer? What if they say no? It feels like a big risk in the whole process because you were finally given an offer for your dream job. You don't want it to fall away now just because you asked for more money or you advocated for yourself. So last year, researchers actually conducted 7 studies on this fear specifically. And in every study, candidates greatly overestimated the chance that negotiating would cause an employer to withdraw the offer. Hiring managers reported that they rarely actually did that. So candidates thought that negotiating was much more likely to cost them the offer than the hiring managers actually said that it would cost them. So I've been a hiring manager and I've been a potential employee on the asking end many times. So throughout this presentation, I'll share a little bit of my insight and personal best practices. But tonight specifically is the final episode of our series about AI and your career and how you can use AI to level up your job search. This is the one where everything that you've worked towards and everything that you've built pays off. So we're actually going to research the real number that you should use with AI. We're going to understand the 2 different psychological forces that actually decide who gets more, which candidate gets more. We're going to draft a counteroffer that will actually get you a yes instead of a no, or maybe later. And I would love to know from you all here, have you ever actually negotiated a job offer before? Is this something that you fall in the camp of afraid to do? Have you tried and been told no? Have you done it and got the yes? Let me know where you fall in this category because it is absolutely a critical aspect of your job search. You want to make sure when you finally land that job that you're getting what you deserve. So welcome back to the Vitality Social Network. If you're new here, my name is Mellynn, and this is episode 5, the final episode of AI in your career. Let's just recap where we've been so far and what we've learned. So for episode 1, you were able to learn how to find the right roles and research companies, make sure that the job is actually a good fit for you or you're a good fit for the job. In episode 2, you were able to build a resume that gets through the ATS, the applicant tracking system that ranks everyone so that you're actually able to get in front of that hiring manager who will actually be able to view your application. Episode 3 is about creating a cover letter that sounds like you and is personalized and humanized, not just a template that, the hiring manager will glaze over because they've all looked the same. And then episode 4, you were able to build a real feedback loop so you can walk into the interview once you actually secured that interview based on your great cover letter, your great resume. And that way we wanted you to walk into it prepared and ready to ace that interview. So every single one of those episodes was about getting the offer. And here we are, we made it. You were given an offer, and now we want to teach you how you can actually negotiate that offer. So tonight is about not leaving money on the table once you have that offer. And like we talked about, most people are leaving money on the table. 58% of job seekers just accept the very first number that they're offered with no pushback at all. Meanwhile, 73% of employers openly say that they expect you to negotiate. And a separate survey of hiring managers found that 89% of companies are genuinely open to it. So not only do they expect it, but they're ready for it, they're open to it. The door is standing wide open, wanting you to walk through it, but most people just never do. Like I said before, I've been a hiring manager, and I go in with my best offer that I think is reasonable for the candidate and for the company and comparable to what everyone else on my team is making. I try to be a fair hiring manager. So every now and then, maybe I will say no, but usually I'm prepared for that person to come back and say, no, I am worth more than that. My time, my experience, my energy is worth more than that. And I know because I read their resume, where they fall in line. And when they give me a counter offer, I'm ready to either agree to it or to meet in the middle. I have a range that my employer, my boss, my supervisor above me has given me that I'm allowed to work within. Sometimes I start at the highest end of the range because I really want that person and that's all I can reasonably do. But most of the time, I'm falling somewhere in the middle and I'm ready for that counteroffer. I do know many employers that actually treat this very differently than I do. They're not giving you a fair number at all. They're walking in at the lowest thing they could possibly give you because if you say yes and you don't even ask for anything different, then they're taking advantage of you. They're ready to give you a lower pay compared to the person that has, worked there for a year or 5 years or walks in next week and negotiates. They don't mind making that little extra money off of your back. But they do have a range as well. If that person's going to push back and they really want to keep them, they're prepared to fight for them. So you just have to understand the values of the company that you're applying for. You have to understand what you're worth. You have to understand the market and what is actually a comparable range that you could get at the same job next door. You have to know how to give a reasonable counteroffer that gives you credit for what you're worth and is comparable to the market. So we're going to talk about how we can do that today. So we're going to cover a few things tonight. So first, there are two psychological forces that decide who gets the higher salary. We'll talk about 5 rules for researching your real market number with AI. We're going to do a live demo. So this is how to actually use AI to build the number that you're going to pitch. We'll do this together on the stream. We're going to do our signature real or hype segment on whether negotiating actually does or does not put your offer at risk. And then we'll also do a live demo drafting the counteroffer email itself. So to close out, again, we're going to talk about this for maybe the next 45 minutes or so, but to close out, you'll have 3 clear prompts that you can take away and run yourself in order to prepare for when you get that offer letter. So to begin, there are exactly 2 things that decide how a salary negotiation ends, and almost nobody prepares for either of them on purpose. So the first is a strategy called anchoring. Decades of negotiation research all point to the same finding, which is whoever names a real number first tends to pull the entire conversation towards that number, whether they mean to or not, okay? So that's why when you walk into a conversation with no number prepared, no number that you're ready to pitch or to ask for, the employer's first offer becomes your anchor. And then you start negotiating from their number instead of from your number that you want. And so the fix here is not really complicated. It's having your own well-researched number ready before the conversation ever even starts. So if you're asked first, then, what do you want to make? What do you think is fair for this position? If you're asked the question, then you're not guessing. You're putting out a number that is well researched and is likely to get a yes. If they go first, then you already know exactly how the number that they offers you compares to reality, compares to the job next door, compares to what you were wanting to ask for in your head. So you need to go in with that number in mind, and if you can, be the first one to pitch the number that you're looking for. The second strategy is your BATNA. This is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This idea comes from the negotiation program at Harvard, actually, and it's pretty simple. So, your leverage in any negotiation is not about how much you want the job, it's about how good your next best option is. If this deal falls through, is there another offer on the table that you're choosing between? Is it that you're going to just stay in your current role? Is it going to be that you are confidently able to spend more time searching for the right job because your savings is adequate? You're not desperate to say yes right now. The point is not to threaten anyone with this information, but it's that knowing your answer to what happens if I say no, what happens if they say no, what happens if I lose this offer. That's what lets you ask calmly and confidently instead of anxiously accepting the first thing that they say. You need to be ready with what is my reasonable best alternative? What is my next option if this one doesn't work out? And that gives you a confident place to come from. AI's job tonight is to help build both of these for you before you ever even speak to a recruiter. So we're going to help you find a real source number for the anchor and a clear picture of your actual alternatives for the BATNA. So let's build the anchor first. But first, let's do a quick check-in, see who's here. Yes, let me know if you're here. What is your dream job, or what is your dream salary for that job? I would love to consider along the same career path that I've been reaching for and shoot well over six figures. I'm sure we all want that. So I am in this phase of my job search of trying to understand what is a reasonable salary based on my decade of experience, based on the other jobs and positions that I've held, based on what the market is looking for right now in my city or in the next larger city over. So we need to understand these concepts and consider how we can apply them. So while I'm searching through this information, I'm wanting to share that with you all too. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because there are 5 rules for researching your number specifically. So let's make sure we're on the same page with what goes into this when we're considering our number, our anchor number that we're going to walk in with. So these are the 5 rules that separate a defensible number from just a guess that you pulled out of thin air, okay? So the first one is to triangulate at least 3 sources. You should never trust the first number that you find from one site. You need to cross-check a market data tool, a couple of actual job postings, especially in pay transparent states. And then you can do an AI synthesis of all of that. So if you have 3 sources shooting around the same target, then you can agree on a real number. One source is just a guess. So you do need to triangulate at least 3 sources. And it helps when you're having these conversations and prompts with AI to either provide those sources, or when it provides you its first best guess, to push back a little bit to dig deeper on where did these sources come from? Is it relevant to my local area? Is it current to this year and time? How are we actually getting this information and making sure that it's relevant to me? Then your second rule. So match every specific part of the job. So not just the title. Title alone is not enough. You need to also match the location of the job, years of experience that you have, the company size, company stage, all of these factors that we're mentioning here can move the needle on the number, sometimes by a little and sometimes by a lot. So a generic search for your job title alone will lie to you. So that's an example of when you're looking for a specific number from several sources, how you can get specific to the exact job or the exact company or the responsibilities of the job. Rule 3 is to ask for total compensation, not just base salary. This is super important. For one reason alone, I actually know of an employer that posts the total compensation on the job ad, but when you start digging a little bit deeper, you realize that the base salary is much lower and they're including your annual bonuses based on performance, or they're including the fact that they pay for your malpractice insurance in the healthcare industry, or they're including the pay time off that they offer you. So you need to have clarity on what the total compensation is, and from both ends of that, because sometimes it could be the case that the base salary is all that they're showing, it is all that they're offering you, but when you dig a little bit deeper or push or ask for a little bit more, they could also give you, paid health care, paid time off, equity, a sign-on bonus. And these benefits are the rest of the number that can go into your decision making process. A lower base with strong equity or strong performance based bonuses, where you get a percentage of the revenue, that can beat sometimes a higher base salary with none of those extras added on, but only if you compare the whole package. So you do have to have an understanding of what goes into it and what you value. I'm someone that values a performance based bonus. I know that if you give me a percent of the revenue, I will work hard to grow the company and shoot for the stars, and that I will be more likely to get the money that I deserve. I'll be well compensated based on that, versus if you give me a fixed salary and no bonus, I feel like there's money being left on the table there. Rule 4 is to build a range, and you want your range to be anchored high but defensible. So not just one number, a range, and your real target is somewhere towards the top. So when you anchor high inside a range, you can actually justify with your sources, your experience, what the research is telling you to do. This is going to be more likely to get you towards the number that you actually want and that you're actually worth. And then rule number 5, write the number down before the call, before the offer, so that you're not trying to decide live under pressure. And then this is how people accidentally lowball themselves, because they're not confident, they're not prepared, and they potentially accept the first thing that is offered to them because they're on the phone, they're under pressure, they're afraid to say, can I consider this and think it over and then get back to you by the end of the week? And even better, they're not prepared to say, I really appreciate that offer. I feel like it's generous, but based on my decade of experience and my research into the market, I actually feel like this number would be more reasonable. Or I actually feel like that as a base plus bonuses would be more reasonable for my experience. So if you consider these 5 rules, which one of them have you skipped before? You can drop a number 1 through 5 in the comments, whether you're here live or you're on the replay. I would love to know if this is something that you've actually tried before. Is this new to you? Are you already confident going in, preparing to negotiate your salary? I hope that if you're here, you're going to try all 5 of these rules the next time that you're offered that job. So let's start talking about how we can actually build your number live. So I'm going to share the next screen of ChatGPT here. I provided some demo information for the prompt. So this could be how you provide in advance the job title, the company size, how much experience that you have, etc. The more information that you can plug into your AI tool, the better. And let them know that you're evaluating the job offer at that company and the relevant information you have. And then you want them to research current total compensation for this role. So again, the total compensation is your base salary, the typical bonus, equity if applicable. So you want them to give you a defensible range with your reasoning. Flag how confident you are in each number and tell me what additional detail would sharpen the estimate. So let's see what ChatGPT has to say here. I also included at the bottom for them to use current identifiable sources, because that's an example of something that we might need to push a little bit harder on to make sure they're not giving us something that's out of date. I've also shown you before in the top left corner here, you can switch where it says ChatGPT. You can switch from the auto instant answers to the version of the tool that thinks a little bit more deeply about this. And when you switch to the thinking version of the tool, it takes time to dig into the research and provide a more thorough answer. It's also a better version of the tool if you want it to give you like a spreadsheet or a document or anything like that in response. So let's see what we've got here. Offer evaluation. Bottom line, for a Charlotte-based, so that's Charlotte, North Carolina, it's a pretty large city, learning and development manager with 7 years of experience, responsibility for 3 training specialists, and an enterprise-wide training scope across multiple locations, they would estimate a defensible range between $100,000 to $120,000. So you might actually, at that point, want to shoot for $110,000 to $115,000, a little bit higher on the range. Target annual bonus between 5 and 10%. So again, maybe you're shooting for 7 to 8%. And then your target cash compensation, and then your equity or long-term incentives. And so it shows here equity or long-term incentives, usually none at this level, or maybe a small, modest retention award based on your bonuses. So that's a great example to know, because if you see a job offer that beats this, then it can tell you that's worth accepting, because it's actually comparable and competitive to what's normally going on for this specific job. And so the job that I was offered for my example is at $92,000 base with a 5% bonus. So the maximum annual cash compensation is approximately around $97K, okay? And so that places the offer below the estimated market midpoint, near the lower end of the broader Charlotte market. And it's not necessarily an absurdly low offer, but it is absolutely a negotiation worthy offer. So this is telling you right now that they are lowballing you. They're hoping that you'll say, wow, that's actually a little bit better than my last job, and I've never made close to 6 figures. I'm a little afraid to ask for that because I don't want them to push back or say no or give this job to someone else. So I'm just going to take that 92 and 5% bonus and be happy with what they offered me, instead of pushing back and realizing, like, no, based on your experience and based on what is normally offered for this level of responsibility, I can confidently ask for that 100K. And in fact, I should shoot a little bit higher than that and let them come back for me and meet in the middle. You know, maybe if I shot right for 115, then they say 105, and look, you just made yourself 10 grand just by asking a question instead of saying yes to the first thing that was offered to you. And then it did provide me some comparable benchmarks. So it showed that it did validate this information that was provided here and compared it to your relevant experience. So this just shows you the example of when you put it on the thinking mode, you get a lot more detail about what actually went into that determination. And it also shares details that would sharpen the estimate here. So the most valuable additional information would be things like the ownership structure. You know, is this a publicly traded company, or is it nonprofit? Is it privately held? What's the exact organizational reach? Do they have retirement benefits or other benefits like that? So that helps you consider a well-rounded version of this job offer. So notice how just by doing this one prompt, you now have a number that you can defend out loud in your own words and have several specific reasons attached. So it's not just a figure that you saw once on a website, but you have pretty thorough detail on why this is a competitive ask or competitive offer based on your specific job market. So I would love to know from you guys right now, honestly, 0 to 10, how confident do you feel right now asking for more money than you're offered? So a similar question to before, maybe a little bit different. Maybe another question is, how confident would you be asking right now for more money than you make? Would you be willing to go to your boss and say, hey, I realized that based on the market and competitive jobs and my value and years of experience at the company, I actually deserve a raise. And beyond that, I don't just deserve a raise, I deserve a compensation reevaluation for my entire structure. I deserve to reevaluate my base salary and my bonus structure based on my level of experience and what I provide to your company. And what's the worst that they can say? No? I mean, you might as well ask. And then what's the next question is, well, could we have that conversation as part of my annual review process? I would love to hear what I could do to do better, or what you think I'm providing to the company in terms of my value, and how we could potentially work towards additional compensation. That's a great question. And then, like we talked about before, what is it that gives you that confidence? We talked about your anchor, your realistic number. We also talked out about the BAFTA. So basically, your best alternative. Are you prepared to say, I actually have another job offer that's offering me more money right now? I could make more money at the company next door, but I love this company. I've poured in 10 years of my life here, and I really value the mission, and I'm an expert at managing people within this realm, within this company, and I want to keep providing my best to you all, but I do need to make sure that I can take care of my family or achieve my personal goals. Is there anything you could do to work with me so that I can stay with you instead of the company next door? Are you prepared to have a best alternative? Sometimes that is your leverage. Even if you don't intend to leave, you need to start applying and having those conversations and considerations just to make yourself a little bit more competitive. So, if you've ranked yourself lowly on the confidence level, whether you're here live thinking, watching along, or you're on the replay, thank you. But if you rated yourself lowly, not very confident, we're going to talk about today's real or hype segment and the biggest reason that can remove any low rankings that should help you be more confident, okay? So tonight's claim is, if you negotiate your offer, there's a real risk that the company just pulls it away from you. That's the claim. So is this real or hype? What do you think? The verdict is actually that it's mostly hype. And the research on this is unusually direct. So across 7 separate studies, researchers found that candidates consistently overestimate how likely negotiating is to blow up a deal compared to what the hiring managers on the other side actually report. So, a separate survey of hundreds of U.S. employers found 89% are open to negotiating after they've already made an offer. Remember that? So, most people are willing. And a compiled analysis of negotiated offers found that 94% stayed completely intact after the candidate countered. So, that's almost everyone. It was actually very rare. In other terms, it was very rare for someone to completely pull an offer off the table and say, you know what, I no longer want to give you this job because of you counteroffered, okay? Oh. Now, there is a couple parts that are real that we need to consider, because asking is not the landmine that it feels like, but there is a real pattern behind the rare cases where it does go wrong. Negotiating for its own sake, with no research behind the number, delivered in a demanding tone, that is certainly an exception. And it's also exactly what tonight's method avoids, because you're walking in with a source number and a respectful, reasonable, research-based ask. You're not just going in and saying, I deserve 10 times more than that. What's wrong with you? How dare you offer me less than that? Do you even know who I am? You're not going in with a tone that you necessarily disrespect their offer, okay? But you just know what you deserve and what is reasonable. But here's the part that's real. So it's worth sitting with this, that women are not negotiating less than you'd think. Recent data actually shows that women make up over half of everyone who negotiates. But the gap shows up somewhere else, which is that In one large survey, women who asked were more likely to simply be told no and be given the original number anyways. So 38% versus 31% for men. So a higher percentage of women were simply told no. Decades of research trace part of that gap to a real social penalty. Women who negotiate assertively, I deserve this, are sometimes rated as less likable by evaluators. And that's a bias that men who do the exact same thing don't face nearly as often. There is a documented fix, though, and it's simple, which is framing your ask with a clear, legitimate reason. So, again, it's not walking in a demanding tone, but it's understanding your value or understanding the value of the position. Say, I understand and appreciate that offer. Did you know that in my last company, I was able to open a brand new location and achieve profitability in the first month? I would really love to bring my skills to the table and help your company achieve the same thing, but I need to be compensated appropriately for that experience and for the skills that I know that I bring. Is there any way that you'd be able to budge on that offer just a little bit, maybe bring it up 5%? That would really get me excited and motivated to perform well at this job. It would really help me feel valued. There's a way to say that appropriately. So it's not a workaround to do that or to acknowledge their position. It's just good negotiating for everybody. And it's the exact structure that we've been talking about and that we're going to put into the counteroffer email that we're going to talk about today. I also want to share, while I get this pulled up, I know that the instant recession fear is hype, okay? And sometimes the uneven way certain asks get received is real, but it is fixable with the right framing. I also want to let you know sometimes things don't go quite the way that you expect, and so it does help to just ask. When I got my last position, I asked for a number that I felt like was shooting way above what they could reasonably afford or offer me, but it was much closer to what I deserved than what they were offering me, and it was close to probably double what they were offering me. That's a large jump. It's not increasing by 10% or something. It was double what they offered me. But I knew my value. They knew my value. They knew where I was coming from and what I was capable of in my last position. And so they said yes. And then a couple of weeks later, they came back to me and said, well, we might have overshot with that initial yes. In order to keep the number of hours that we have you working, I actually need to consider if you're willing to step down just a little bit a notch and meet me more in the middle. So that was interesting. It was one of the first times that I had got exactly what I asked for, which was way overshooting. But when they came back to me and brought it down just a little bit, I had two ways I could go. I could say, I understand where you're coming from. Let me counteroffer again. Let me stand and fight for what I know I deserve. Or let me keep my hours, let me keep my position and show you what I'm worth. And I tend to go that route. I still felt like what they were offering was fair for the job. It was fair compared to the market. And so I was willing to keep my hours and keep what they were offering me and then show them over time, let me prove to you why I'm worth that higher number through the work that I do, and then we'll have a performance-based conversation. So sometimes it's not always discussed right at the beginning. Sometimes it's discussed later on. Sometimes things change later on. So you do have to be prepared to be flexible in these conversations. But for the first conversation, I'm going to show you how we can do our initial counteroffer, and we are going to do that through email. So a lot of the times people will actually receive their initial offer via email. They say, okay, let's think about this, and I'll follow up with an offer letter, and we're going to pitch, your job and your benefits package and your total salary. And then you can be prepared on how you're going to counteroffer through email as well. Now, We also want to recommend this because, frankly, if you're trying to pitch over the phone, that's an entirely separate skill that we have. Sometimes you have to worry about your confidence, your tone, what they're going to say if they say no. There's a lot more back and forth that can happen. So you can take some of the basic concepts that we're discussing here from the email, but we're going to start with the email draft. So draft a counter offer email that asks for my base salary that we agreed on was more comparable to the market rate, gives a clear, legitimate reason for requesting this using the market range and my experience. It expresses genuine enthusiasm, so we don't want to come across as rude or dismissive. We want to tell them how excited we are, how thankful we are. And we acknowledge the company's offer and position, but has a direct but warm question about their flexibility in the offer. And we're going to keep it short and sweet, under 150 words. We don't want to do several paragraphs long or anything. So let's see what ChatGPT is able to offer. I did also provide them the initial information about the job. So they say, thank you so much for the offer and for the opportunity to join your company in this position. I'm genuinely so excited about the role and the chance to contribute to your growing team. But after reviewing the offer, I wanted to ask whether there's any flexibility on the base salary. Based on my research, comparable positions like this one are typically closer to the $100,000 to $112,000 range. And with my 8 years of experience in this role, I believe a base salary of $108,000 would be better reflective of the market and the value that I can bring. I appreciate your consideration and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. So, short and sweet, but overall pleasant and direct. And again, this is something that you are able to say via phone call as well if you need to. So, ChatGPT can help you with that initial script to build your confidence. So, when you get that call with your initial offer, you're not put on the spot to just say, yes, thank you, I would love that. You know what your anchor number is. You know what your other reasonable offer is. You know what you can counter with and what you're worth. And you're able to do that. Or, like we said, you're able to say, thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate this offer. I need a moment to consider if I'd like to move forward, and then I'll get back to you. And then you can send this email, or then you can follow up with a phone call. I would love to know if any of you have ever tried this before, if you have gone the route of sending a counter offer via email, or if you've handled this successfully on the phone. What do you think works better? What has been a success story for you? I would love to know. I've gotten a few questions about this that I feel like would be a good time to address. So let's go ahead and do that now. And if you have any questions in the chat, feel free to let me know and I'll be sure to address those too. So first, what if I don't actually have a best alternative offer, a competing offer? Do I actually have any leverage at all? And yes, of course you do. Of course you do. Your best alternative offer does not have to be another offer, okay? Your best alternative can be staying in your current role. I'm going to stay with the company that I'm at, actually. Or I'm going to spend more time searching for a job that is honoring the pay that I deserve. Right? I'm going to look a little bit further for a job that's a better fit for what I need. Or maybe you have a number that is backed by real data, and that data is your leverage. Independent of whether you have a second offer in your hand or not, you know what a good number looks like and you know what you're worth. So you can still confidently use that as leverage. Another question is, should I negotiate the benefits, the PTO, or just the base salary? And first, it kind of depends on what your priority is, but you do want to look at it as a whole package, not just the headlining number. If they're firm on that base number, then that is the time to ask about can you do a sign-on bonus? Can you be flexible with your PTO or with your bonus structure or my start date? Companies often have more flexibility outside of the base salary than in it. So if they stand their ground on that base number, that's your time to look outside of it a little bit. And then what if they just say, nope, this is our final offer, take it. Um, we'll take that seriously, but you can still ask one more time, once specifically. I understand, but is there any flexibility on the one thing that matters most to you? Maybe that is the PTO, the paid days off. Maybe it is the bonus structure. One respectful ask rarely is going to cost you anything. Again, the least they can do is say no, and then you get to decide if you're going to take the offer or leave it. And I know that makes some people a little bit uncomfortable, because what if you're like, oh, I don't like conflict. I definitely would like to do this without all the uncomfortable back and forth. And that's exactly what the email format is for. So you don't have to negotiate live on the phone if that's not your strength. A clear, warm, well-reasoned email will accomplish the same exact thing without the improvisation. So that's why it's the time to do that if you're not comfortable with those skills yet on the phone. And then I would just love to recap. So this is the last episode of this series. I hope by now you have learned from episode 1 how you find the right role for you. From episode 2 and 3, you got your resume and your cover letter on point, and that's what helped you actually get the conversation with the hiring manager. And episode 4 helped you ace that interview. And then now you want to make sure that the number attached to all of that work is the right one. So none of this conversation was separate. It was always one system that comes together. I do want to leave you with 3 prompts that you can use. So these are your takeaways. Let me go ahead and share the screen for that. So if you want, you can go ahead and screenshot and save this information. You're able to maybe like copy and paste the text and post it right into your AI tool. I definitely recommend watching the whole series to have a better understanding of how to use AI to get your job, get the right job, get the interview, succeed at the interview, and then, definitely at this point, make sure that you get the pay that you're worth. But you can also take it piece by piece based on the episode that is most relevant to the skill that you need. So they absolutely build on each other, but you can take and pick and choose the information that is most helpful to you. At this point, when you're considering how you're actually going to negotiate your offer, these are the 3 prompts that you'll use in order to partner with AI to get that specific offer that you deserve. So the first one is best for knowing that real number before any conversation and having that strong anchor. You know what you're going to walk in as your first pitch or your first ask. The second prompt is best for writing your strong counteroffer with the right tone, keeping it concise, keeping it effective. And then the third prompt is the objection rehearsal. So this will help you practice for those real life objections, building in confidence into your replies and holding your ground, because often they are going to give you at least one pushback, right? I think that's a great question. What about the rejection? So I would love to know if you mean you were not given an offer at all, or if they reject your counteroffer or your pitch for the salary that you'd like. Because in either case, this can help you confidently pitch yourself. I would say if your question is about rejection, like you've had the interview and they decided they're going to move forward with different candidates, it's absolutely a great idea to reach out and ask the question, is there anything that I could have done to stand out above the other candidates? Would you mind giving me a little bit of insight into the candidate that you chose and why you chose to move forward with that candidate? Does not hurt to ask the question and try to understand how you could be more competitive or more successful in your next interview. But if you're referring to the rejection, the rejection about your salary expectations, then that's what this third prompt is for. So what you'll do is copy and paste maybe the email or what they said to you when they responded to your counteroffer and said no. And then this way they can help you practice exactly what to say out loud. So respond the way a real person might. So this one actually specifically, you can put your email in and say, tell me what a hiring manager might say. Let me be prepared for those objections before you even get one. You can be prepared. You can use this prompt, and that way you can confidently be ready to say, well, I understand and I appreciate you raising it a little bit higher, or I appreciate you considering my ask, but did you know that the current market rate is this number? Or have you considered that I have 10 years of experience and my prior success in the role? Be prepared to stand on the why behind the number that you asked for in the first place. And again, it doesn't hurt to ask that question. Do you have any flexibility? Like, what can you offer me is almost the question. Are you allowed to be flexible on that? Sometimes you just have to ask the question, is there any flexibility allowed that you could go up on this offer? But, be ready to stand your ground in those things that we learned, like where these numbers came from. They were a guess. They weren't like random out of thin air. It was based on the research that we've done. So you can confidently stand on that, or you can stand on your next best offer, like we talked about. Maybe you're saying, well, I really was excited to work for this company and bring my skills to the table so I can help you succeed. But I really need to make sure that I can confidently continue paying my bills or reaching my personal goals and being paid the value that I'm worth, that I know I can at this company, right? So let's see. You have had the answer ready before even asked the question. You seem to have prepared the episode well. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think about these topics a lot because I've been in both positions. I've been in the position of a hiring manager, having to have these conversations. I've also been in the position of needing a job and like trying to learn how I could be more effective, how I can present myself better, and trying to learn as much as I can about these topics. I also have an amazing team that helps me prepare as well. And so thank you so much to anybody who's here watching, anybody who supports me in any way. I appreciate you all so much. And we have a wonderful little community, actually. So if you're interested in being a part of it, I would absolutely invite you to join our Discord. So we have a community of people that are part of this live streaming network. They want to share information that they're passionate about with the world. And we also have a little group for our evening conversation about how to use AI to get a job or be more productive in our lives. So if you're interested in being part of that, then please join us. And we can always keep the conversation going. So you're more than welcome to message the group for support, or you can DM me directly after the stream. I would love to help you however I can. That's just kind of my goal in life. I want to be able to share any knowledge that I have to help other people, so we can all be successful, we can all be happy, we can all get the job and the money that we deserve. That's what life should be, right? So feel free to meet me there. If you want to talk after this, you can also potentially maybe pitch any ideas that you have for how we could keep the conversation going, or what else you want to learn to use AI for to make your life more productive. So I would love to have you there. But that's all we have for today. So thank you everybody who joined the stream and who posted something in the chat or asked questions or liked it. The likes are definitely a vote for, like, you like my content, you want me to keep doing this, and I really appreciate all of that engagement so much. So thank you to everybody, and I hope that you have an amazing rest of your night, and we'll see you later. I'll see you. My next stream is Wednesday morning for my morning productivity series, but we have a few other hosts that'll be around as well. So tomorrow there's a series about songwriting and making music, and that guy's a lot of fun. So I look forward to having you all there and seeing you next time. So take care. Bye, everybody.